This is an absolute health and safety nightmare.
Exactly. No executive producers allowed in here.
Yeah man, that looks good.
Films, documentary filmmaker.
Oh shit man.
Is that
Pants are right up my arse. That looks good. No, I think it's good. I think it's good.
Hello and thanks for joining us for episode 1, 2, 3 of the TalkCreate podcast. I'm your host Ciaran and today I'm joined by none other than Hannah Currie. Now, for all of you who don't know who Hannah is, she is an independent documentary filmmaker from Glasgow. Most of you, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in my circle, most people would know you from the documentary you made about a young man by the name of Lumo. Mm-hmm. The title of the documentary is We Are All Here, but I think most people know it as, it's certainly in my circle, the Lumo documentary.
Yes.
That was a documentary that was focused on like the aftermath of that young man's suicide. Mm-hmm. He was a young kind of hip hop artist for Glasgow. And him and his friends were kind of making waves in the kind of small scene that we have here in Glasgow, and he kind of a really untimely death. How do you even begin to approach like a family who's like grieving in that situation and like go in there with a camera and just start, I'm going to make a documentary about you? Where's the process even begin?
The process for me began when I read about a story, and it totally struck me how powerful it was, because I saw a massive fundamental shift in the way that the hip hop community was speaking about emotion, dealing with grief, speaking about mental health in a way that, like after his passing, in a way that had just never ever been done before in those circles. And I was like, that is kind of fascinating that this has just caused this huge shift, and I really believe that's normally when I make a film it's because I'm really inspired by something. So I'm really inspired by the fact that this kind of hyper masculine sort of group of guys have totally turned that thinking on its head and realised, you know, the need to be able to be open with each other, be able to talk about feelings. So I guess if you get an idea in your head, for me it's like I kind of need to try and see it through, and I suppose it's always like when you're approaching a family or approaching a set of friends about making a film about somebody's life, it's really, you know, number one, sensitively and understanding that you're not the priority, and that they might say no, and being okay with that, being willing to walk away if they do, because it's not for everyone. Two, I suppose trying to find the best way to explain why you want to do what you do. And for me, I really, really felt that tragedy, you know, that can't be changed, but something positive could come out of it. And actually when I spoke to the friends and family, that was a major motivation of theirs. They just didn't want his death to be in vain. They wanted to make sure it didn't happen to another family, another group of friends. They'd also been massively misrepresented in the press. Well, the story had been misrepresented in the press, yeah, and really heavy-handed, like newspapers like The Sun, you know, kind of wading in, covering it in a way that really wasn't sensitive at all, and taking some of that, you know, that sort of truth and that representation away from that family and who that boy was, and they wanted to get some of that back, that power back, to be able to tell his story.
What was their angle? Like particularly The Sun, for instance, what was their angle on it?
Well, let's just say using words like, you know, plunged into the Clyde and things.
Just salacious way of writing about it.
Yeah, clickbaity, and using sort of quotes, photographs without any permission, saying that I need to get this right, but he was missing for 5 days, so the body hadn't been found, and there was misreporting around that, saying it had been found and things like that. So obviously very upsetting for the family.
Absolutely. So that was a way for them to kind of take back a bit of control over the narrative, and that sounds a bit cheap, the narrative, but like take a bit of control over how people saw him after. Yeah. But did you hear about the suicide through the way we would all have heard about it at the time? Or did you have a connection within the hip hop community that was kind of your door in there?
Both, yeah. So I did have a connection with the hip hop community. I'd put on hip hop nights before through Milk and which you've played.
Because one of the many strings to your bow is you're also a DJ.
Well, DJ, yeah, I'm a DJ. A promoter of live music and more now club nights, or rather more now nothing at all because COVID era. Yeah. But yeah, so I'd put on some hip hop nights. So I had a lot of the guys as friends on Facebook, and one of them was Loki, Orwell Prize winning author and rapper who's really like transcended the Scottish scene, and is putting it on the map in many ways, which is great. But he wrote an article about it that was so powerful about how we've kind of got this river that divides Glasgow, and there's a lot of shame like in that river, you know, that we're kind of don't really face up to as a city. Like we lose a lot of people to that river. There's obviously also kind of the poverty divide and things like that. So he wrote very powerfully about it, that we really, really need to stand up and address this, and that really spoke to me. He knew Lumo, and I'd met one of Lumo's friends before at Levels Radio. I don't know if you remember Levels, pirate radio station in Glasgow, and I had been going out with like a hip hop guy at the time, and I'd been there, and I'd met one of Lumo's best pals who's in the film. So I approached him first and kind of told him what I wanted to do, and they wanted to kind of do the same thing, but it did take a lot of time. I mean, that was only 3 months after he passed away that I got in touch with him, and there was false starts, and obviously they're still grieving, and there were kind of conversations that happened that were incredibly sensitive, but I think we all kind of were working towards the same goal, and that and
I think that from our point of view, watching it, it's the first time I watched it, I'll be honest, like I was like tearing up at the end. Certain parts of it kind of touched me in a certain way, because coming from an eerily similar background to him and his mates, like see when I seen like the video footage, me and my friends are more than 10 years older than Lumo and his friends are, but we had an eerily similar kind of genesis to him and his friends, even though me and my friends were mostly kind of graffiti kids and not so much on the music side of it. That there's so many parallels between the two groups, and probably eerily similar to like so many young west of Scotland or Scottish young men who are dealing with this idea of if you're a creative and artistic and sensitive person, it's not enough to just be that. If you come from a certain background in Glasgow, you also have to be masculine, and where do you find that masculinity from? And I spoke to Gaz recently about this, about finding the masculinity and melting the creativity together, and seems to be hip hop is like really the only way you can truly do it in a strange way, because it encapsulates so many things, the art, the music, the dancing, things like that. So that documentary was really like fucked me up in a way, because I was like, there's been times where I felt like Lumo was feeling, and he was struggling to find out who he was. That seems to be the theme that goes through the entire documentary, and with the finding of religion, and even just the beginning when he finding a name to be a rapper, like that was me, because I changed my name to a graffiti name when I was a kid, and I went through loads of like tag names and stuff like that, because you have to find that alias, and when you find that alias, that's where you get your strength and stuff like that. So I imagine that's why that's been maybe one of your most popular things you've made. It's because it's really touched in a really deep way quite a lot of people that are like me and like Lumo and his friends, on a pure emotional level, which I've not really experienced in a lot of documentaries I've watched, because it's not been so close to home, which I think is why it worked really, really well. But I really just felt for his mum and his sister. And you must have taken a long time to build up these relationships with them, with the mum and the sister particularly.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you for saying all that, because it's amazing to hear that articulated. I don't really think I've heard somebody say that in response to watching it, and it's always amazing to hear people's thoughts after they've watched it, because depending on where you're from, who you are, you know, whether you're a mother or a guy that's just like them or whatever, everyone's got their own reaction to it, and that one I haven't heard, and it's so true. And I think that for that reason, that's why I find like hip hop culture and graffiti culture really, really important, because it is a form of expression that, you know, young men from these areas can actually channel energy in, and it's instead of being violent on the streets and instead of getting, you know, too wrapped up in drugs and things like that. And that's like so important, and I think really needs to be taken more seriously by the creative industries in Scotland. But yeah, I did take a while to build up those relationships, and it has been so enriching to my life. I'm still really close with his family, and like was texting his sister this morning, and we go out for coffee. She just lives along the road, and yeah, I just feel that I think that it's been you know, I was going to say mutually beneficial, but that sounds so commercial, but just mutually enriching in the sense that this was my first film. Like, I had never picked up a camera before this, I'd never made a documentary, and I was so drawn to this story in such a powerful way that despite all my hang-ups about, you know, like, am I good enough to be able to tell this story? Like, I've got no idea what I'm doing, is it fair to wade in something so serious, and but I really felt so strongly about this story and telling it that a lot of that fear kind of evaporated, or there was a wee kind of like core thing in me that was like, keep going, because you can do this. And when they told me, you know, what they wanted to achieve with the film, it really aligned with what I wanted to achieve, which was to raise awareness and, you know, educate people, and especially young people, which I think this film can do.
So see, on like a purely technical sense, because you said it was your first documentary you were making, did you have you must have had an idea of how this finished product was going to look? So one thing that I found really interesting about the documentary was I'm a big fan of Adam Curtis, and what I love about him is he's like archival footage and found footage, and sometimes footage that's perhaps not even relevant to the kind of narrative that he's speaking about at that place and time. But what I really liked about this documentary was the way you got into the mind of Lumo, was that, or Callum, was that he created his own video diaries, which he never released to the public, and were, I am assuming, only found after his passing. And it was the fact that you had face-to-face interviews with his friends and family, and you had this archival footage that really gave you an in, and you wouldn't have been around in some of these times where they were filmed, because they were maybe filmed years prior to his death, and to you maybe ever hearing about him. But so did you have an idea that stuff, even that footage even existed, and how would that documentary have looked if you hadn't have had that?
The video diaries, it would have been a completely different film, and I only found out about the video diaries myself halfway through editing the film, which obviously was a massive discovery, and completely like through I think I had like 2 weeks, because I made it at uni, so I think I had like 2 weeks to finish the edit, and then I went out for coffee with his mum and his sister, and Janet mentioned to me that they'd found these videos on his camera, these video diaries with him speaking right to camera, and she said, we've not been able to watch them, but if you want, we can give them to you. So I took them away on a hard drive, plugged that in, and just could not believe what I saw. And it was that kind of moment of like, oh my god, like this has just unlocked so much in terms of his headspace and what he was going through. And you know, I had a sense of a lot of that from his lyrics and from what his friends and family told me, but it was like the final piece of the puzzle. He tells himself in these video diaries. And but on the other hand, it was like, fuck, like my whole edit, my whole timeline, and what I tried to do initially was fit the video diaries into what I'd already edited, and I remember like my tutor at uni coming in and looking at it and being like, Hannah, like you have got a great film in here somewhere, but you don't have it right now. And she was like, to be honest, I would scrap everything and start again. And like when you hear that, it's just like pure sinking feeling, like, oh my god, like that is such a massive task, but thank God she did, because of course he had to tell his own story in the documentary, and I always wanted him. It was always a kind of line in my head, or any pitch doc that I wrote, it was like, he's going to tell his own story through his you know, there's loads of music videos that exist, there's loads of live performances, there's that battle rap that's in it where he kind of battles himself, which is incredibly powerful. And so I kind of knew he would tell his own story through those means, but I didn't know at the start, and it was almost like some kind of like, you're like Lumo's there somewhere, do you know what I mean? Like throwing this kind of thing in, and I knew obviously I had to, and credit to my brother who edited it, who really helped me in those moments of kind of like, right, we need to completely restructure this, and we got there together. We're both fans of hip hop, him way more than I am, and he kind of got me into the Scottish hip hop scene, and yeah, just using all of that. I mean, what an incredibly rich thing to have for somebody that's no longer here. It's like, how do you represent this person on screen, and are you, because obviously when you interview people and when you choose which bits of footage to use, you're essentially choosing how their life comes across, and there's a massive kind of weight on your shoulders of, am I doing them justice, am I telling this story the way he'd have wanted it to be told and the way that his friends and family wanted to be told. But it built such a clear picture. It was, as I say, it was like the final piece of the jigsaw, because I had these interviews that told a really clear story. I had his lyrics which told that, you know, which backed that up, and then these video diaries, and everything just kind of slotted in.
Another documentary that you made was titled "That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore," and after watching it I completely agreed with you. It was a documentary about your Uncle Paul and your Aunt Lindsay who live over in Ireland. At some point in your Uncle Paul's life he suffered a brain aneurysm, and after that his life changed. One the title alludes to one of the themes of the documentary, which is that it seemed to me as an outsider the way that he keeps himself in check maybe is to repeat these dad jokes.
What's the fastest cake in the world, huh?
I don't know.
It's gone. What do you call a girl between two houses?
I don't know.
A lane. I believe you have a brand new brain. He says, thank you very much. I says, never used. I heard you have a brand new brain. He says, what do you mean? Never used. And I says, not only that, I believe you have a brand new brain. So, thanks. What do you mean? Never used.
You too.
Did I tell you one about the socks?
See the way that he would repeat these jokes over and over again, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Was it actually a way of him exercising his brain, or was that just me as an outsider thinking it was that?
No, it's kind of his go-to when he can't. So he's got short-term memory loss now. So at times, you know, he can't remember what he's done 10 minutes ago. He can't remember if he's already had breakfast. He can't remember if he drinks, which unfortunately he does. Then he can't remember. He'll get more and more fatigued with alcohol, and then he can't remember even like who you are. So he might kind of be like, turn to me and be like, sorry, what's your name again? That's just when he's drunk, really. But jokes he can remember, and it's kind of his go-to zone, and it's kind of, there's also it's the part of the brain that was affected, it's frontal lobe, so it can change your personality, it can accentuate bits of your personality that were already there, and he was kind of a big joker, you know, kind of laugh a minute guy, but these are things that are in reserve from like before it happened, and that's what he can call upon, and that's what he can remember. And he also has a need to complete the joke, so even if you say I've already heard it, he'll need to tell you it all.
So he was already quite annoying before he had to be like
he was a Dubliner, he was like a bit of a likely lad, and he is still all those things, and still you know, a really golden hearted person, really.
That definitely comes across.
Yeah.
But I've met many people just like your uncle in my life, and brain aneurysm or not, that does wear away at you a little bit when the jokes keep on it. The process of that, because that story was a lot more closer to home than other documentaries you've made, part of me would think the access was easier, but because it was so close to home, you have maybe not more of a responsibility, but you're basically opening your front door. You're basically opening the front door to your house to everyone. Do you see it like that? Or as someone like me who knows where my public and private life begins and ends, doing a documentary about my family, even if I was a documentary maker, I would have to really, really understand what the finished product was going to look like and how it was going to be perceived. Did that enter your mind at all?
Oh god, it was a fucking nightmare. Camera 2, it was a fucking nightmare. It was it was like, I was way naive about making a film about family, and honestly not so much about opening the door to their lives, because one thing that I think that with my aunt and uncle living so remotely, and with the fact that carers are just left to their own devices and to get on with it, and nobody really knows about how hard that life is or cares, to be honest, and it's like except from their immediate family, and their friends have even melted away, and they've kind of got, you know, so they're really isolated and really alone in this like incredibly difficult situation. And I really wanted to tell people about that. Like I really wanted to say, you know, and this is a reality for like hundreds of thousands of people across the country that aren't getting help with serious illnesses, or people that need care, and also they're just like awesome people. They're just you know, people just love them, they really warm to them, and I knew that. So I knew I had like two amazing people. I knew I had another issue that I needed, you know, that needed some attention. And again, I was inspired. I'm inspired by them. I'm inspired by what it takes to keep going after something that catastrophic has happened, both to you and to the person that's in love with you, because they're essentially now in a relationship with a different person, really.
And how long had they been together before? A
long time, like as long as I can remember. And it happened 10 years ago, but since I was wee, and I'm 31 now, so...
There comes a time where... There was a part of the documentary where your auntie says she feels needed but unloved.
Yeah.
And these two things are very stark, very different. There comes a time, surely, in everyone's life where there's no... This might sound defeatist, but your auntie and uncle kind of have to grow to live with the fact that this is going to be the reality of their life for the rest of their life. Much like someone who, it seems like an appropriate similarity to me, but someone who goes to jail for the rest of their life. They just kind of have to get used to the fact that this is it for the rest of my life.
Or they walk away. And most people, and as my uncle says at the end of the film, I think there is a statistic, I don't have the exact statistic, but it's a very high percentage of relationships don't survive brain injury. You know, it's different if your son sustains a brain injury, and obviously that is, you know, it's your son, but in relationships you very often find that they don't survive it, because it really does. I mean, like, they don't sleep in the same hours, he falls asleep during the day, like he has a different, he's him in there, but it's a different reality.
Hannah, what the fuck is Zoom to Groom?
I don't know, man. It is an anomaly. It is a world of its own. It's something that my mates told me about during lockdown. There was this guy was doing this online dating show called Zoom to Groom, whereby he basically would start a Zoom like webinar, and if you were single you would join it, and he would just throw two of you randomly together on a 90-second speed date, and the whole internet would watch it live.
But if you were to come up to us, I couldn't tell that you're from Scotland. It's not that bad.
I moved to Guernsey when I was 16.
Where is he?
Guernsey.
There's a lot of Tories down there. Nah. So what do you do?
I can't believe he messed up her name, mate.
I know, it's the worst, isn't it?
Here's a quick one. How much does a lizard weigh? Depends on the scales.
I love it.
Have you ever done speed dating before?
I have, yes.
Yes, I knew it. Because you're just rapid fire with the questions, like, it's amazing.
Would you rather have
dicks
for hands, no, fingers, or dicks for toes?
Are you ladies put your pussy like this? Shake your body, don't stop, don't miss.
Basically, I was like, that sounds mental, and I tuned in, and it really was the most entertaining, like, wacky thing that I had seen probably in my life, like, and let alone in lockdown, and way better than anything that was on telly during lockdown. And I'll be honest, like, I was a bit half cut when I was watching it, and the guy was saying on screen, like, oh, next week's the last week. He'd done like 10 episodes,
So
just from his
attic.
attic.
Where was it being hosted, on YouTube or on?
Just on Facebook at this point. Right. So it was just going out live on Facebook, and he was just doing it in his attic as a guy who's a events manager guy. So he'll normally like do like, you know, put like transmit and Spice Girls at Murrayfield and do all the event stuff for that. You know, like planning shit. Which he obviously lost all that work during COVID. So he started this virtual thing in his attic, and he usually does quizzes, and he raises quite a lot of money for charity. He's raised like lots for charity, like over 50 grand, and then on Saturday nights he did Zoom to Groom, and it's just crazy. So it's like 90-second speed dates live on the internet. At this point it was totally random, so you literally could, like, you'd have like a woman from Shettleston like matched for like a guy from Australia, like totally different age range, and it was just kind of like car crash TV, you know, just kind of being like, alright, like, but fascinating to watch. And I just really saw the potential in it, and I had lost, at that point, I'd lost all of my kind of current documentary work due to COVID. So I reached out to him and was like, mate, this needs to continue, like, can you please get in touch with me about developing this? And he did, and so we branded it up, we formatted it a bit more so that each contestant has 3 speed dates and they choose their favourite. I cast it in advance now to, it's a wee bit of kind of firefighting, because you can end up with some weird folk if you don't, and we sometimes do, because there's still an opportunity for people to join in live. So if they're watching and they fancy dates, they can actually jump in. Right. But just to try and find interesting people, find new people each week, theme tune, graphics, all the rest, and it has blown up. Like our last episode, like we haven't done any paid promotion on this whatsoever, but our last episode reached 60,000 people. Oh. In fact, I think it's at 65 now, and that's just like, that was only a couple of days ago.
So where is it hosted now?
Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch.
Okay.
So we use StreamYard.
Because Twitch is the new market that's probably.
And we haven't. I mean, Facebook's where we're getting like the big strong of reviews, and I suppose that's because most people are on it. Twitch and YouTube, we need to put a bit into growing those platforms. But we figured, we've got StreamYard, so you can stream to all of them seamlessly.
So Facebook's still a place where people use to like access interesting content like that.
90% of our viewers are from
Facebook. Because Facebook's now is regarded as being like just your granny, basically.
Well, I think the next, because our sort of age range watching is like 24 to 44, and it's mainly women, but like a few dedicated men, or quite a few dedicated men that love the show. And we need to work on growing the audience to those younger members, but everyone that tunes in absolutely loves it. So it's crazy.
Your job as a producer is basically to screen all the weird masturbators that
it's all, pretty much, and like don't always succeed in weeding them out, to be honest. Like sometimes you end up with somebody on here and you're just like, oh shit, this is going to be a car crash. But I cast it all in advance, so people apply. I have a call with them, a test obviously that the software is working with their home computers. They join in on a Saturday night. We put them on 3 speed dates for 90 seconds. We put a wee timer up, and it's top quality telly.
It was funny as fuck. I wonder like how long it will take before you can do follow-ups on the dates, because right now we're in the era of COVID and we can't meet up in person, especially if you're 2 strangers to each other. And so I wonder if like in the future COVID has actually created opportunities for us to do a platform like that wouldn't have came up if it wasn't for what we're going through right now.
No, like for me, lockdown and COVID has like brought all of this sort of unexpected joy to my life, which seems crass to say, because it's obviously caused, you know, it's been a nightmare for so many people, and but for somebody like me who kind of was feeling a lot of the pressures of the world at the time, like actually taking the foot off the gas really, really helped me to sort of sort my head out, to focus in on what I really wanted to do, and to take a step back and realise, well, actually that job you were in, you weren't terribly happy doing it. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't really worth the money and the stress. I was working for a production company, and focus on my own projects, and through that I've developed a new documentary which is kind of being considered by BBC right now. I've been approached for this other doc, and Zoom to Groom was obviously born out of lockdown. It was born out of the whole idea that dating would be a nightmare in this age, because you can't really safely meet people, you can't communicate. But what's unexpectedly come out of it is that there's loads of people that are finding this new voice and new platform that actually, you know, there's a lot of shy people that have come on and they've told us privately, like, you've changed my life. I never actually could meet people on dates, and I've got some confidence from this. There's a whole community around Zoom to Groom, so there's actually a community that sit on a Zoom call at the same time as we broadcast the show and all talk to each other, and they're folk that are living alone, you know, that are typically, and they've met loads of new friends through it, so there's like big fan base. And for me, it's been a lifeline, having that in the diary every Saturday, knowing you're going to get a big laugh, and like the unexpected really does happen. It's all live. I've never produced anything live before, so it's kind of my job to put people on screen at the right time, to take them off screen at the right time, put the comments up, because it's all interactive, so people can comment and we'll put them up on screen. And at times it just completely falls apart, but in a really hilarious way. So it's a lot of the time it's just me screaming fuck at the screen.
It seemed like watching it seemed like the most obvious format to have as like a dating show, because we live in such a technological age where everything is online, and there's not, as much as we are human beings and we have to have physical contact with people, more and more our lives are driven by digital contact with each other. So it just seemed like a very obvious premise, but in many ways it had to have been created by the current situation we're in, because that we don't have any other choice. So like I think that you and the guy that created it need to get that intellectual property like enshrined
100%.
in law, because I feel like something like Zoom to Groom is a real
it's a winner.
Potential.
It's a winner.
The most interesting TV show in the future.
I don't know MD that's watched it and not come back to watch more or stayed on. Like, our average viewer stays for over 60 minutes, and we broadcast for like 2.5 hours, and there's still at least 200 live viewers at the end. As I say, the views grow throughout the week, so it's reaching, you know, by the end of the day, it's got 10,000 people. It's like, it's incredible, and to actually, you know, a lot of broadcasters are not holding people's attention for that long, and people are there, they're really invested in the characters. We do bring people back that folk love. It is a total winner. I'm in the process now that we're coming to the end. We've only got one episode left. Because I mean, as usual, I've begged, borrowed and stole, so I've like stole lights and not stole them, I've borrowed them. That was a slip. I've borrowed lights from the amazing Progressive broadcast for like a nominal fee, and they need to go back, and I need to go back to work and all of these kind of things, but I'm just like, this show needs to continue, and it needs to be done right. There's like lots of sort of weak imitations of this kind of thing, but they're just not hitting the mark, and there's something really special about reaching people in their home where they're in their own environment. You get a wee nosy into what their life's like. People have called it Tinder Live, so it's like you're not just chatting to somebody trying to get the chat. You get 90 seconds to be like, is this person weird or not? Do we hit it off? Is it an attraction? And you like, sometimes you're seeing it and you're like, they really like each other, and other times, and then they kind of like, they say to us, oh, can I get their details? And it's safe too, because each of them asks, can I get their details? We ask the other person before we pass it on. We don't just give it out. So it's a really safe environment for dating, and a fun environment for dating. And
I wonder if you would get the same amount of like banter and interaction and fun, but and this might be as a biased person being Scottish, but the fact that it was like all people from Scotland was just like,
well, funny you should say that, because just recently, so I was like, this is doing so well in Scotland, we need to put it out to a wider audience. So I advertised for applications on this thing called Star Now, which is something I used to use when I worked in production to find casts. So it's basically people that want to be famous or want to be on TV, and I got inundated with applications. So last week on the show we had a guy from Manchester, we had a guy from Birmingham, we had a woman from London. And it was just as joyful, because what was amazing about it, like, I put, you know, this guy who is just out there from Glasgow with this woman that was like really well to do, really gorgeous from London, and she's just like has no idea what she's been dropped into. She's just like, who is this guy? What the fuck is he talking about? Like, and it's like, so it's gold to watch.
I see a situation like that as a good opportunity to highlight the naivety of some of some like well-to-do Southern English person getting matched up with some guy for Ayrshire who's about 2 bottles of Buckfast deep. I
was exactly that, and then we had a guy that joined live, so a guy that just was in the comments, I'd have a go at this. So he gets sent, like, he joins, he's sitting like in the East End in a Rangers top, and he's like, it's the best top there is, and you're just like, I'm about to put you in a date with some like model from London. But you're almost like, fucking can't wait. It's like dropping a cat amongst the pigeons. Do you know what I mean? You're just boom, sit back and wait and see what happens. And I can, like, everybody that's joined the online stream, so all the kind of daters we guests, and usually we've got a special guest comedian or whatever. So Gary Fald's a comedian. We also had D Maxwell. I can see them backstage during this date being like this, like, what the fuck is going on? Like everyone or people just like pissing themselves laughing, and it's just like, it is like the best high. It's so cool.
But as you said before, like that's something you can do during the lockdown, because we're still in the end of the lockdown basically.
We'll be going back into it soon and all.
Yes, unfortunately it seems like it. These are things you can do like during the lockdown, but certainly this lockdown we're going through has like had some real effect on the work that you were making. You mentioned that it's put some projects on pause.
Yeah.
Are you going to pick up these projects?
100%. Yeah, one thing I've kind of had to learn, so I used to be quite, if things didn't go to plan, it would be like, oh my god, like really fatalistic about things, like, oh my god, that's not working out kind of thing, and what if this and what if that. I've actually gained a lot of confidence through those 2 films, doing well, through being nominated for some awards, winning some awards and stuff. I've realised that like this whole idea I had of myself as an imposter in a world that I didn't really know about, I was only ever serving to like really denigrate myself, and I've stopped doing that. I've really tried to become confident as a filmmaker, understanding that I'm still learning. There's loads of shit I don't know, but that's the case for many people. And as long as you have drive, ambition, and want to, and have a real reason, like at the heart for making these films, then why shouldn't you? Like, why should other people? So with that has come like a lot more flexibility, a lot more malleability to just be like, okay, if I had a couple of days, of course, like when COVID first hit, I was working as an assistant producer on a doc. I lost that job.
What was the job?
I was the assistant producer on a Channel 4 documentary. It was somebody else's doc about an island. It's still in production, so I can't really say much about it. But to be quite honest, Ciaran, like I'd lost my confidence in my own work again, and I was kind of doing that because I didn't know what else to do, and I needed money. And actually, it's been a blessing in disguise, because now I've picked up my own projects again. They're kind of going now, but yeah, some projects.
What can you tell us about these projects?
So the project I was working on was the documentary about Ross Muir, the artist from Glasgow, who I'm completely fascinated with, and I just really...
Ross Muir is known for doing what I use the term detournement, which or subversion, which is like a branch of like Dadaism, apparently. Detournement, which is like you take a well-known symbol, whether it be, in Ross Muir's example, a painting of Van Gogh, and you put like a Adidas tracksuit on him, so you're kind of subverting, you're subverting what that original content was and making it, giving it a new context. That's how I see him, as a kind of detournement artist.
And I mean, I first became aware of him actually when I was filming the Lumo documentary. We were meant to be filming, so I was filming some stuff with Jen and Janet at the bridge where Callum took his life. They were laying some flowers down, and we were going to go a walk around the park, and it was pissing it down, and so we ended up phoning up this wee gift shop in Finniston called Velvet Moon, run by this amazing fiery haired woman called Brenda, who's just like a tour de force. And she was like, of course you can film in the shop, come in. So I went to just film some stuff with them in the shop, just wandering around doing mother-daughter things was the idea, to just get some footage of that. And I see Ross's art in Brenda's shop, and I was like, that's interesting, like really like that. And actually at the time I was about to do the premiere of the original Lumo film, the pre-BBC Lumo film, which was my uni film, We're All Here. And so I was like, I'm going to buy, my family had raised some money, we'd had like a little thing, they'd raised some money and said, I'll put that into your event for Mental Health Foundation. And I was like, I'm going to buy one of these prints with that money, get Ross to sign it, and raffle it off, because it'll probably, I think people will like this, especially the hip hop community. It's kind of, like it speaks to like young guys. And right enough, so I bought it, I then messaged Ross and said, would you be up for signing this before you send it out? And he messaged me back and was like, I've just refunded your money. You can have the print. I've got a really big one sitting here. And it was like a massive one that was expensive. And he gave me it, and it raised loads of money on the night. And Ross came along to the premiere. He loved the film, and then we got chatting about making a film together. And we just get on, and I really like him and respect him. And it's interesting that you mentioned dadism, because I really remember that as something that stuck out to me when I was, just studying high school art, as like something that's a really fascinating concept to me, and the whole snobbery of the art world, and throwing that into question, and the fact that like we're still talking about that shit years later, and that's the whole point. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not and it's like, what is art, and how far can we expand it, and what kind of labels we put on things. So there's a certain, in Ross gets stick from some people for doing what he does, and on the flip side he's got this massive fan base. He's come from a really rough background in Alexandria. Most of his friends are still addicted to heroin. He was addicted himself in a previous life, and lost his mother to alcoholism, lost his father when he, just before he gained success as a painter. He has had a tough paper round, and he's totally made something of himself. And again, going back to that thing of like, I'm completely inspired by that, and I want to know more about that person. I want to know what it takes to make something of yourself after that amount of adversity, because I guess like something in me is like, well, I want to learn from you.
So when you were beginning, we kind of following his life story, as it were, you had already had that connection with him through buying the print and doing the thing with the Lumo documentary, and so did you just come up with this the idea and present it to him of, I would like to figure you out, basically? And what was his reaction to that, and also like, where did you get to in the timeline of the documentary before you've had to pause it?
Well, it's interesting actually. So I was in the Netherlands with the Lumo film at a film festival, a documentary festival out there called TalkCreate. It's an amazing festival, and I took my mum and my brother, because like I think it was our European premiere for the Lumo film, so it was like the first place outside of the UK that wanted to show the film, which was really exciting to me. And took my mum, it was her birthday, and took my brother, and the three of us had an amazing time, as you can imagine, in Amsterdam. And we got talking like absolutely ripped one night, and I was like, I really want to make a film about Ross Muir, blah blah blah, and we could do this and we could do that. And like randomly, I think it was the next day or 2 days later, Ross texted me and was like, would you ever consider making a film about like, the kind of stuff I do?
So there's a bit of serendipity there.
Yeah, and Ross is really into all that stuff, and he taught me a lot about magic with a K, and actually, funnily enough, so Ross was telling me about this whole Sigil magic thing, and I ended up doing it for the BAFTA, and then I won the BAFTA, so I was like, fuck it, and I'm converted to this shit.
Explain magic with a K.
Magic with a K, CK at the end. It's a thing called Sigil magic, and
it's a thing called what?
Sigil magic.
Sigil magic.
Sigil, S-I-G-I-L.
Sigil. So
yeah.
What does sigil
and you
mean?
get two reactions, right? So when you tell people about this, so the first time Ross told me, I'm like in the back of my head, I'm like, sure mate, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because it's,
wacky.
Aye, it's out there. And then maybe you just get to a stage in your life, or you're just at that, and you're just like, do you know what? Fuck it, I'm just gonna give that a try. And then it fucking comes through for you, and you're like, well, maybe I'll give it a try again. And then you're just like, right, this is a thing. But you get two reactions when you say that. I mean, there was a time I was like shouting from the rooftops, because I was like pure won the BAFTA. Then I'm off to New York. Then I'm off to like North Carolina with the film, and I'm like, everybody's paying for my travel and stuff, and I'm just like, I'm fucking. And I've not done it in a while, because I think it needs to be something that you really, really want, and your intentions need to be totally pure. And I don't feel that I've had something since then that I've want to ask for. But essentially, I suppose it's a version of positive affirmation. And you get two reactions, as I say. So you get the people that are just like, alright mate, or you can kind of see them glossing over, and then you get the people that are really interested, and it only works if you believe in it. So essentially, you can be as skeptical as you want, but it's like, well, it won't work for you, or you can believe in it and it will work for you. And I have to say, not a bad result for me, and Ross totally believes in it, and it's definitely got him through a lot of hard times.
But
Ciaran,
how does it physically manifest?
If you want in the club, we'll talk later. But
so what is there like sigil magic? So is it like,
right? I'll tell you.
It's positive affirmation, But are you ruining it by talking about it?
No, not at all. Anybody, there's YouTube videos on it. Anybody that wants to, there's the guy, is it Grant Morrison, who's the comic book artist from Glasgow? He's a big
proponent of it.
Yes, because essentially he puts his success down to that. Like, he's just a wee guy from like working class background in Glasgow who's got this global success, and he's like doing big conference talks to people and being like, try it works. And you know, the first time I watched it, I was like, this guy's off his rocker. And then you kind of go, well, do you know what, maybe like weirder things have happened, and that kind of serendipity thing that you talked about there, that happens to me a lot. And I always, like, it's like a force of energy, do you know? It's almost like if you do yoga and you just kind of like hit the sweet spot, or something happens and stars align and you're like, fuck that, it's like I feel that energy of like there's something more.
What would the viewer do if he or she wanted to tap into some of this magic?
Rule number 1 of Magic Club is you have to believe in the magic, and but it's really simple. You essentially, so you would write down what you want, and it needs to be specific, and it should. So I was nominated for a Scottish BAFTA. Don't want to like say that it wasn't down to like my film being good, but you know, I had some serious competition, and I never ever. So I was nominated for Scottish BAFTA, so I was like, fuck it, I'll try it. So you'd write down what you want. So say I want to win a Scottish BAFTA this weekend, and then you would change it to the affirmative. So I will win a Scottish BAFTA. So you score out what you've written, I will win a Scottish BAFTA this weekend. Be quite specific about it.
Right.
And then you go through it and you cross out all of the vowels. So you cross out the I, you cross out all of the repeat consonants. So you're just left with a string of letters, none of them the same.
But what if you're a bit like me and you don't actually know the difference between a vowel and a consonant?
Well, a vowel is A-E-I, watch Countdown and you'll get it by the end of the episode. A-E-I-O-U is your vowels, consonants is everything else in the alphabet. So you're taking out all your A-E-I-O-U's, you're taking out all your repeat consonants, you're left with a string of letters, and then out of those string of letters, you make a symbol, and you can redraw it and get it right. You'll be good at it because you're an artist. Ross does it all the time. There's a story I can't unfortunately tell you because it is a secret, but there's a sigil in one of his paintings, and it basically led to massive things.
Wow.
And it's in there, and you can see it, but maybe you'll find out about that.
Sigil is the name of the person who came up with it?
Nah, I think it's a type of magic. S-I-G-I-L. And then you make a symbol that looks magic to you, and then every so often you just look at it, you carry it around with you, keep it in your back pocket, keep it in your wallet, and just ask weirdly things happen out of it, and it's pretty cool. When
it's
Ross,
based on it's some sort of symbolism, or
it's completely proven science.
Yeah.
Are you drawing a Nazi symbol, for fuck's sake?
So, given Sigil magic, I want to do erroneously drawn swastika with I want 100,000 views in this video. I'll probably edit that bit out. See, as myself as a fan of documentaries, and you as a maker of documentaries, I've often fantasised about if I could have like access.
Don't know what you were going to say there. Could you make a film about me?
One day I might be asking you to do that,
maybe.
about me and Konzo.
Maybe.
You've already made a short film about me and Konzo. Well, not about me and Konzo, but me and Konzo were characters in the film.
I never needed anyone as much as when I needed you.
Was that like the first music video you had made? Because it's pretty much a music video.
I suppose so. I have helped make music. I made a music video like years ago for a Glasgow band, but
what was the video?
Friends in America did. We used a green screen and we changed all the colours behind them and stuff, and they all had an object that meant something. So loads of people came and they had to all bring one object that meant something to them. So I had a guy bringing like a Greg sausage roll, and a woman bringing like her, antique from her granny or whatever. But it's kind of basic stuff, and this idea, like on such a small budget, ended up kind of growing arms and legs and being like bigger than what the budget should really allow for. But thankfully, got friends in high places. And
well, that's like being inside that production was a real testament to how important it is to have friends and maybe not high places, but certain places, so you can pull all these different resources that you've got access to.
Well, I like collect good people, I would say, and I don't mean in the sense that like, oh, they'll be useful to me. I'm just like,
You don't mean in the Epstein sense?
No. Yeah, and hire them out with my little black book. Oh, it's so dark. But yeah, basically, I like what I was saying earlier about just like having no room for bullshit in my life. Like what I really do have like an abundance of room for is just like good cunts, basically. So like if I meet someone and I'm just like, and it doesn't matter like where they are on the ladder or like whether they're, you know, like I've got like best pals that have come from me volunteering at the Beats and Cancer Camp that have nothing to do with the film industry, and then I've got people like Cons that shot the GSFF. So he shot the footage of the Lumo mural that ended up in the Lumo film, totally off his own back because he wanted to make something in tribute to Lumo. He gave me that footage to use for free in Lumo, and I was, you know, so in my head I was like, the first job I can get you out on, I will. And granted, you know, I didn't have a lot to pay him from that, but he got as much as you guys got and more than anybody else got, kind of thing. So like, as in like, there was barely any money to go around.
It was thousands and thousands of pounds.
£150,000 settlement. But basically, but he said that's the first time, you know, that he's been sort of asked to shoot, and then that ended up getting him other wee jobs off the back of it. And like, I'll take that guy with me wherever I go. Do you know what I mean? Like, I really, really want to get him more opportunities.
He's a solid guy.
So, and he's like 24, and he's totally done that all on his own, and he's had the tough like tough paper round Cons.
Coming from Aberdeen, you're going to have
just in terms of like, there's loads of shit that's gone down with him, and he's just got this drive. And again, I'm just like, I love people like that because I just want to be more like them. So when I see somebody like that who's just like pure gold and very, very talented and non-pretentious, like I want them in my policy kind of thing.
In a like a country that's as small as Scotland, when you find these connections with people that are willing to work hard and make a good product because they have a passion for it, I think that like when you find these people, you pure grab onto them for fucking dear life.
As long as you can, until they've like outgrown you, and then they're off on their own doing their own thing, and that's how it should be. And when you work in the film industry, you get really like, so there's people in the film industry that just care about themselves and just care about their own position and don't really want to help anyone, and then there's the flip side of that, and there's people that have really helped me and given me all the time in the world, and I want to be one of those people. I don't want to be one of those people, do you know what I mean? So I'll always give opportunity, and then it's been, plus like, I benefit from that too. Like, he's an amazing shooter with a really good eye, really down to earth, easy to work with. As were you guys, and Natalie, the choreographer, Justin, the drone guy, did that totally off his own back. It's just like, it was like a good wee operation.
So if you could work with another team, like, see if off the top of your head, if you could like pick another team or another production company or another theme, or have access to another world that you could build a documentary around, what would that look like?
What a massive question. Like, MD with integrity, to be honest. Like, honesty and integrity is really, really important to me. So people that are doing their thing and killing it, but without standing on the shoulders of other people, and people are kind of falling away to get their success, and you just see that in the world over and over again, and it really becomes more about the money and the success and the status than it does about the story and the people. That doesn't appeal to me at all. And there's people there's a filmmaker called Orlando von Eisendale, always mispronounce his surname, but he won the Oscar for White Helmets, which was about the Syrian kind of collective who were just going out totally off their own back to rescue people that bombs had dropped on, and it's an amazing film. And he then has been kind of by proxy that won another Oscar through his production company for a skateboarding film in another, I think it was in Palestine. And basically like just a really, really nice guy. He made a mental health film as well. He lost his brother to suicide. Nice guy, totally down to earth. I met him at the Mental Health Film Awards, and
you met the guy who made the White Helmets documentary?
Yeah, he won an award at the Scottish Mental Health film awards, and so did I. And that's obviously like, you've got the Oscars and you've got like the Scottish Mental Health, which is like all like charity body, do you know what I mean? And he was still there because that meant a lot to him, and that's how you know that the guy's genuine.
If you could access something, click your fingers, and you had access to a topic or a subject that you want to show people, what do you think that would be?
Why they changed sherbet dib dabs to or sherbet fountains to plastic packaging. Why?
The international conspiracy? Who was behind that?
I don't know, I need to
The
know.
sugar lobby?
I like the paper packets and the sense of... Also, I've tried a strawberry one recently.
Was it the plastic lobby then that tried to get rid of the paper?
Fuck knows, Ciaran, but we need to know.
Who was it? The international conglomerate of sugar deniers?
It's interesting that you say like massive story, because like I've never, and maybe it's just where I'm at in my career and being, you know, kind of, I'm not too hasty in terms of I know where I'm at and like what I can kind of handle now as a filmmaker, but I am really attracted to smaller stories and things that are, you know, well, small stories and like small things that can shine a light on a much bigger situation in a really personal way. So like my kind of like dream subjects, like I mean, like I've emailed people and asked if I can make films about them. So I did email Mary Black, the MP, and I was very interested in. I'm interested in the underdog, you know, in terms of like, and what that represents, because, you know, one side of the coin people are like ripping the piss out of her, the other side of the coin people think she's a legend, but really like that is so fundamental, like somebody like Mary being in Westminster, which is just like inaccessible, impenetrable, like the fucking cunts, those cunts, the fucking shit that those cunts pull, and like really it's like it's madness, and it's like it's just been allowed to go on for so long, and for somebody like that to go in and shake things up, I'm just like yes. And for it to be a woman from a working class background, like I love that and I'm fascinated by it. And she said, well, her PA said not at the moment, but I'll probably keep trying that, because maybe after our time in Westminster is done, you know, like there's a story to be told there, and it's really, really fascinating, and I love seeing somebody like shake all that stuff off their shoulders and all that kind of criticism and just own it. Like, you know, there's a reason those videos of her in Westminster have gone viral, because it's just like, and that's what they're so scared of, is because like really if you let people in that have got an opinion, got some life experience, like the life experience on the issues that they're actually sitting debating and deciding our futures on, somebody comes in with that experience and completely owns them, that's what they're terrified of, because like it breaks the little bubble, the little eating bubble.
The reason why, one of the myriad reasons why a system like the Westminster government retains its power is because I believe it's because it's remained insular for centuries, and its power is hidden within it and its establishments. It's almost akin to some sort of like ancient secret society.
It is.
And Mary Black, in interviews that I've watched of her when she became an MP in Westminster, she talks a wee bit about that. See, even like physically, for a visual sense, see when you look at like the European Union, the government, the Congress there, you look at the Scottish government in Holyrood, you look at even the Canadian Parliament, which is an older parliament, they have physically a semicircle, and you'll see in a lot of modern governments there's a kind of semicircle idea where the leader of the house, or the speaker of the house, is in the centre, and the parties are built around that in some sort of circle. But then you look at Westminster, and I don't know if I've ever seen another government throughout the world, there might be, but Westminster facing off against each other. When you watch it on some TV cameras, it seems like a big place, Westminster, but when you see it in other photographs, it's a very cramped space, and you get all these majority like old white men shouting at each other.
I can't stand it, man.
They're just shouting at each other back and forth, and that is not a government, or what a government should be in a modern sense. A government should just be a bunch of boring people talking about the price of a bus ticket or how much money they've got in order to fix a road. they shouldn't be talking about anything other than that. I don't want politicians to be speaking about grand ideas of what the future should be. That should be up to other people, not politicians, I don't think.
The whole system is completely fucked, and it really, I mean, there must, for somebody like Mary Black, I mean, the one thing that is more admirable than anything is like, how do you keep your mouth shut when you're around those people? Because I would just like, I'd last about 2 days before I was like, you are a bunch of fucking twats. Like, I just could not do it. I couldn't be around that. It just makes me, even talking about it makes me squirm physically. And yeah, what you say, like, it's like you watch these like old period movies, like, you know, what was the one, The Favourite or whatever, and like with Queen, former history student who knows fuck all about history, but like the kind of opposition in the party and that, and them all in wigs and shouting at each other, it's changed hardly any. Like, in like hundreds of years, you've still got these and stuff, and you're just these privately like educated, extremely rich, extremely out of touch people deciding on the future of people that have, you know, they've never even stepped foot in their societies or seen those problems themselves or have any real grasp of it, because unfortunately, like, a lot of them, they're not even conscious. Privilege to that degree makes you you're so out of step with what they don't even believe that half the problems exist.
See, at the point where you're making documentaries about politicians, though, is that the point where you become a journalist and not a documentary filmmaker? Because like, because documentary is the theme, where is that line between journalist and unbiased recorder of a moment?
It's impossible to be unbiased. I mean, that's a big sort of thing in documentary theory, is like, you can't really be unbiased because you are you, and you're choosing, much like the journalist is choosing their words, you are, and always kind of has a standpoint, you are choosing which bits of somebody's life to represent on screen, and it's going to fit the narrative that you've, but I really try and have a conversation with contributors and make sure that we're kind of on the same page, because I don't want anything to be like a mass, I don't want to do it, it's just not in my interest to like do somebody a disservice. Sometimes you'd have to convince them, like, look, this is really important, I think this should go in because of this, and have that conversation. But like, I think journalism is always felt a wee bit more maybe straight down, like the straight and narrow kind of interview, facts presented, this that. Whereas storytelling is a wee bit different, and in my experience much more difficult. I used to do journalism, but making a story out of somebody's life, and having the pressures of doing them justice and telling the truth versus, or, you know, the truth, because everything is a version of the truth. As soon as you cut things out, you're choosing to tell this truth and maybe not that, you know. So and for somebody that thinks too much, like, it can be torturous at times, to be honest. But then the flip side of that is when people see it, relate to it, and get something from it, and it somehow makes them think about something, or makes them think twice about something, or changes their opinion. You know, documentaries have changed the world at points. Like, the whole Blackfish thing had such a massive effect on, and the Epstein thing, I mean, like, the visibility, and that's journalist too, and that is quite a journalistic documentary.
I still don't know where that line is, because
it's blurred, definitely. That's okay though.
Like a documentary that covers something that's for the public good, like Epstein, or like Afghanistan or Iraq war, etc. That's journalism. But does it become just documentary, whatever that is, when it's about a family going through a trauma? I mean, when is it not journalism?
Well, again, I think there's like a tendency to want to put these labels on things, and to want to say like, oh, you're a journalist, you're a filmmaker, you're this, you're that. But actually, like, they do merge, and people are capable of both, and people are capable of, like, you know, the Epstein doc is just like as a beautifully made series, harrowing, but really journalistic as well, and really investigative in nature, and that's the marrying of two like very intense skills, and done really, really well. And I think those, you have to be journalistic to a sense, you have to be truthful and fact check and things, but, you know, there are things that you can do creatively with a documentary that are way more out there, and you can kind of put yourself in a documentary, like I did in That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, where I'm kind of, my voice is there because it's my family, and you wouldn't really find a journalist necessarily doing that, but
that's where some of the Adam Curtis, he narrates and he edits and he directs and he finds the archival footage. He's like completely seems to be like 100%
but it's that thing again of like
product.
Creativity and trying to put like boxes around it never really works. Like, what do you call yourself?
A commercial artist.
See, like, I would never think of you as a commercial artist, like, because when you put commercial in front of what you do, like, you're like, that to me somehow takes like a level of creativity away from, and I mean, I just see you as an artist, I suppose, but it's interesting. Like, I just think as soon as you try to put creativity in boxes and be like, oh, this is this or this is that, it's kind of like always fighting. Like, who were you talking about earlier? Was it Duchamp? No.
Dada.
Yeah, like, so as soon as you like, you're always going to have like people try to like elbow their way out of those boxes and be like, no, wait a minute, well, this isn't really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do this, or I'm trying to do something else entirely. And then amazing things can be born by like completely just being like fucking off all the boundaries and just being like, actually, I'm doing this, and I know it sounds mad, but wait for it. And then they do something and you're like, wow, this is a whole new thing. I'm not like, I don't think I'm necessarily capable of that level of experimentation, but I do think that there's, I'm not like necessarily a fan of naming it. As long as people relate to it, that's alright.
So before we melt our brains too much, I think we've covered very many bases, and this is the point in the podcast where I ask Hannah, who are you going to shout out, Hannah?
Shout out to myself. No, I'm kidding.
Egomaniac.
No. Shout out to you for having me on the podcast. Shout out to Conzo and you for doing that crazy dancing stuff for Glasgow Short Film Festival. Shout out to them. Their festival has had to move online because of COVID. Shout out to my big brother Tim, who's an editor, who, like, a bit like me, suffered from a bit of that kind of self-doubt, self-confidence issues about, oh, can I really do this? And then I worked with him for the first time and was like, you are an amazing editor and I can't wait to do that again. Shout out to my family. And cons that I was speaking about, like young people. So there's a couple of young filmmakers that I'm mentoring right now. So there's a girl called Bonnie who made a film about suicide in her hometown of Dundee, and she's like young, she's super young, and the film has had like over 100,000 views and has now been picked up by NHS as part of their suicide prevention campaign. And I really love seeing like people just going out and doing it for themselves. And Cons is one of those people, so he's got Wavy Music, which is mainly music videos and grime videos and things like that, but he's also shooting more and more stuff, so he should get more work. And there's a guy called Ewan Loney who made actually a little football documentary piece, and Loves a View from the Terrace, which I'd made that little VT for, and he reached out to me and he'd seen that Joke Isn't Funny Anymore, and he was just like so lovely and so keen that I got him working on a little project I'm doing with Mental Health Foundation, and he's been brilliant. So shout out to anybody that's just trying and hard working and keeping on going despite being told that they can't, despite being told, oh, there's no opportunities there, despite being told, oh, you should do something else. I call bullshit and all of that. If anybody ever tells you that you can't do what you want to do, it's either because they're jealous or because they're threatened or because they've just kind of lost their zest for life. Like, and I just think that humans are made to create, and if you follow your kind of hopes and dreams to do that, even if it's just in your spare time, then you'll be a lot happier.
So if someone was to, a young filmmaker was to try and access the world of BBC or some production company or something like that, and they had no foot in the door, they couldn't even see the door. I think that now, given the fact that people like me can make a podcast using a laptop and a shitty camera that I got for Argos, would you think that like there's no gatekeepers anymore?
No, it's that whole system, and it really was a system, is sort of like becoming a bit like our government is just falling apart under the weight of this pandemic. UK government, that is. so too, and there's kind of these structures and these institutions that have all these rules as to why you have to be a certain thing, or such and such's nephew will get in before you do. I was that filmmaker that had no doors, and tried and really almost gave up, and kind of did give up and went to do something. I'll do history at uni for what? Fuck knows. But always felt a calling and found my way back to it, and eventually, do you know what I mean, in my 30s, when I'd hoped it would be in my 20s, eventually I've got around to it, because I didn't give up and I wanted to do it. And if you want to do it and you don't give up, you can. And yeah, that wee Ewan guy, he made his own. He just went out and filmed some empty stadiums. He wrote a bit of poetry, spoken word piece, slapped it over the top, sent it to BBC Sport, and they picked it up and put it on their Facebook, and now he's on their radar. And that's the kind of like, you know, but there's I didn't make my own stuff in my 20s because I had no confidence. And the main piece of advice I give to these like young filmmakers that I'm mentoring, or people that reach out to me and ask advice, is like, the sooner you can let go of your own hang-ups, at least verbally, like at least, you know, the better, because you constantly putting yourself down or talking about, oh, I'm not really very good at that, you're only doing yourself a disservice, and you're only making other people believe that you're not as good as you potentially are. I'm not saying go out there and say I'm amazing, that's not what I mean. I'm just saying that don't constantly put yourself down. Like, we're all learning, we're all trying. If you have like a real need in you to create something and make stuff, then that's your pass. Like, you don't need anything else. You don't need, you know, money, education, somebody's approval. Like, you don't need any of that. You just need to
a
want
camera
to
and a will,
or your phone.
the will to create. So you heard it here, folks. You heard it here firsthand. There's no more excuses. What have we learned for this podcast? Final thought.
Fucking wreck the place.
Final thought is, fuck your hang-ups. They don't exist. Believe in yourself. Fucking talk to your friends and family if you feel like shit. Nothing can't be solved with a little bit of that mouth talk, chat, right? Easy.
Oh yeah, big time.
Be creative. Talk creative. Thanks to you, the viewer. Thanks to Hannah Currie here.
Thank you.
We've got links in the bio. We can watch all of these interesting things we've been talking about. Educate yourself. Thanks for your time, guys. Take care.
Elbow bump.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you kindly.
I hope that wasn't too dull.
Oh, no, I don't think.